Did your parents have an idea of what to do with you? Like I was just trying to think of my own kids when they were growing up. If one of them had been like that, I don't know how I don't know what I would have done.
My parents had no idea what was going on. They just put me down, wrote me off as a problem child. It was all my fault. I just needed to buck up. I just needed to, stop being a pain, so on and so forth. But you also have to remember that I grew up in England. If you hadn't detected that in my accent, I grew up in England, and there back then, you did not talk about mental health. You did not talk about depression. Nobody admitted to being in therapy, having a therapist, going to counseling. That was huge taboo. And I think it is still a lot more these days in England. It's still kind of behind the times compared to how it's perceived in America, where people will openly say, yeah, my therapist told me this, or, I go to a therapist every week. That's not uncommon to hear here, but in England, it's still very taboo. And when I was growing up, it was absolutely like you would never admit that publicly.
Well, you're supposed to have a stiff upper lip. I mean, that's kind of what we're told about the British, right?
And that's exactly true. And so I think and I'm making this up because they haven't told me this, but I think that for my parents, if they had started looking at it in a mental health way, that would have been just the most shameful, embarrassing experience. So they didn't do that. They just, it was all my fault. I just needed to buck up, and that's how we went on. So I got no help from my parents. In fact, I got no help from anywhere until...
Did you have other siblings?
I have one brother.
Okay.
I got no help from there.
Okay.
But then he was a child too.
Right.
The first time I got so frustrated was when I studied at South Bank University in London. I was at the National Bakery School, where I trained to be a pastry chef, amongst other things. And I was living away from home, and plucked up the courage to go and find a counselor that was part of the university, because I was just, however old I was, 19 years old, 20 years old, I was just like, there's got to be more to life than this. Why is there no joy? I was incredibly successful at the university. I was actually the top student in my graduating year, top student in the country for my graduating year. So I was incredibly successful at university. I was incredibly successful at life, but I was sad the whole time. And none of the good things that were happening in my life brought me any joy. And so my first foray into trying to figure this out and get some external help was when I must have been 20 years old when I went to see a counselor at university.